I think Joan makes a very good point about us using discerning minds when we're choosing books for children. And I would warn parents against only choosing explicitly Christian texts.
Yes.
You know, there are some great books out there. I'm a fan of Elmer the Elephant, and dare I say Rupert the Bear.
Yeah. Now
That,
you're in my league now with Rupert the Bear. Yeah.
but there's good children's literature out there which is not explicitly Christian, and as far as I know may not have been written by a Christian author, but they're good, wholesome stories where parents can talk to the children about the plot and the characters and draw things out. And then there are things like the Narnia books, where we can say, well, C.S. Lewis, he's a sound kind of guy, so this must be good literature. And then there are books which I would avoid, like The Plague.
Yes.
And people have got their views about the Harry Potter books, but I'm more concerned, dare I say, about the books of Philip Pullman.
Oh, yes.
His Dark Materials trilogy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with you.
That concerns me much more, because he sets out to undermine the Christian faith and attack the church.
Yes.
But parents should be buying and borrowing books. Use the public library, for goodness sake.
Yeah, and Joan, you were saying it's also good for parents to encourage their children, to encourage their children, to encourage their children. Yeah. Bless you, Joan. Thanks for that. And very good points that come out there. Obviously, this is something that many are facing in schools today with this. How do you deal with that from the Christian aspect, whereas we should respect one another, there are differences there? How do you encourage folks to deal with that?
Well, I think certainly in terms of religious education, it's important that we don't just concentrate on the things that on the surface appear similar between different world faiths. Obviously there are key links between Judaism and Christianity, because Christianity follows on from Judaism, and for Muslims, Islam follows on from Christianity and Judaism in that it came after it, and they accept, and we must remember this, Muslims accept Jesus and Moses as prophets. And there's respect. We don't often pick this up in the media, but there is a respect amongst Muslims who are true believers of their faith for what they call people of the book, Jews and Christians. And I think in the same way we can reciprocate in that we respect people of faith who want to know more about the God who created everything and has a purpose for us. But the point I'm making here is that when it comes to religious education, we only do young people, and in your case adults, a service if we are bold enough to point out that there are very important differences between the way that faiths picture God and understand the human being's relationship with him, and relationship between the different faiths. So for instance, I remember I heard this story about C.S. Lewis once more. Apparently there was a great big conference going in Oxford University where theologians from around the world had come together to discuss the different world faiths, and they wanted to come up with, in one sentence, the difference between Christianity and the other world religions. And they'd spent a whole day discussing it, and C.S. Lewis put his head round the door to see what was happening. They invited him in and said, what's the difference between Christianity and Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, the other world faiths? And he said, you want to sum that in a sentence? Well, I can give you one word: grace. And for Christians, it's grace, isn't it? It's that we don't have to work hard. We don't have to impress God by sticking to his list of rules day by day. We simply invite his Spirit to come into our life so that we are transformed and we accept his love in Jesus. And we know that we're saved. Even if we get things wrong, day by day, as we do, we come back to him and ask forgiveness. So grace is the difference between Christianity and other faiths. But I think you're right. To want to speak with a Muslim friend and to be open and to hear her views about religion and to be prepared to share yours, because how else will we as Christians ever let people know that our understanding of God is so complete if we keep our faith to ourselves and we close our ears to others? I think just to hear what Jesus says, in that we must treat others as we would want to be treated, I'd say we must listen to others as we would want them to listen to us. And we must speak to others respectfully as we would want them to speak to us. It's when we get into dialogue with people of other faiths, we've got nothing to feel embarrassed about. We know that our faith is secure. So let's hear what other people say, and then when we share with them our love of Christ and the super abundant, joyful life that he's prepared for everyone, how can they not be excited about that as well?
Got a couple of interesting emails here. Lawrence, first of all, is saying he probably didn't want this email. So because we didn't want it, I'm going to read it. Whether or not teachers are teaching pupils about witchcraft or religion makes little difference to me. Both should be taught as mythology. That belongs to the primitive past of mankind and his general ignorance of scientific fact. I will be more bothered about teachers teaching pupils that the earth was created in 6 days, or that it's 6,000 years old and all started with 2 people, than I would about a few legends of witches that children already accept as a fantasy. I'm not quite sure he's got the grasp. I don't think all children accept witches as fantasy anymore. But you've got this problem of, and in actual fact, it's followed up, if I could just get my email working here, by Jack, who then says, I'm an atheist. And it's great. We had a couple of atheists on last week on the phone. I'm very glad that they contact us. How do you look on the views of atheists? Well, that's a program in itself, I suppose. I believe that we were all bacteria. Then we were turned to fish, then land creatures, not Christians, theory of evolution. I couldn't see how people could pop out of nowhere and how a snake can talk about Adam and Eve. Science is a fact, religion a belief. We're talking about communicating the reality of Christianity. It's got to come, hasn't it, with a good deal of understanding and clarity, that we make our points clear, that we don't just talk about 2 people thousands of years ago that happened to be there. We deal with the whole area of how they came and what came on. Is it a major problem, this problem of creationism and evolution? Is it a big problem today? And some of your ideas for these folks that have emailed in.
Well, I mean, thank you, Lawrence and Jack. In terms of evolution creation, there is a debate within the Christian community. And of course, not just Christians. This is a debate within the Jewish community, the Muslim community, and other faith groups into how the world came into being, why the world came into being. It's not so much how old the world is, but why it is as it is and what's going to happen in the future. And that's where Christians and other faith groups have a particular understanding of the processes. Christians would say, well, it's because God created everything for his pleasure and he has plans for the future. But Christians don't necessarily agree as to how long that took, whether it is a literal 6 days or billions of years. There are Christians who are theistic evolutionists. They would say, we believe in evolution, and it's a process that God designed, and that's why the world is as great and diverse as it is, because he put in motion a perfect process. But there are Christians who say, actually, the way that the world is has nothing to do with evolution. It's because God created 20,000 species of fish and placed them in the oceans. It's that God has sculpted the earth in his fashion, and whether that took 6 days or 4.5 billion years, it's by the hand of God that everything came to be. Christians are united on one thing, though, that God made the world. Whether it took 6 days or X billion years, God made the world. And the Christians are also united on why God made the world. He made the world because he could and because it would give him pleasure. And so human beings, like polar bears and penguins and gorillas, are actually called into being. They live because it gives God pleasure. And I think that's a gospel that Christians don't necessarily preach